Hello and welcome to the Space Between Ideas. I'm Blaine Gates. So, what is it? Day number 96. We are rounding the bend. Do you know the chicken song? I won't sing it. The chicken song. Look on YouTube for the chicken song. It's a song that we used to sing when we were kids in the car going for, traveling around. We traveled to the United States. I'm from Canada. We traveled to the US a lot, like at least once every 2 years. And when we're in the car, I guess when the kids are kind of being annoying, eventually mom is like, okay, guys, let's sing some songs. And we used to sing the chicken song. It was awesome. So we are rounding the bend. And all right, so so in this, the last section, the last week of this 101-day challenge, I have been doing an overview, a review of each of the checklists individually. And specifically, I've been explaining the process that I use when I am going through checklists with students. Now, of course, every individual is going to have a different experience when they are working with me. And there are some slight differences depending on what type of business you're doing. But in general, I do use a certain process. And as you know, so for 3 days, we talked about managing teams and the three checklists that help a lot when it comes to managing teams. And then the last 4 days, I have been talking about, for example, when you have different people, like different team members, different people on a team, when they have to work together, or we have companies do different entities that work together that support each other. When you're doing B2B type business activities, then there are 4 different checklists that we discussed for improving those deals, like operational agreements, service, providing each other services. All right, and then so now we are on to the last 3 checklists. I feel like we lost a day somewhere because isn't it day number 96 today? And there are 3 checklists left, which brings us to day number 96, 97, 98. And then there's day number 99 and day number 100 and day number 1. There just seems to be more days than, anyways, strange. All right, so today we are going to talk about state progress. And this section of the review, we're going to talk about state progress, state styles, and state resources. And probably after that, we can talk about state progress again. Because the backbone, as you know from the last 96 days, are the 3 endeavor elements, and then how the 3 endeavor elements connect to the 9 themes of the state progress checklist. And since we're doing the state progress checklist again today, let's just go into that. But before I start, then also, so this section of the coaching process, it's kind of there's 2 different things you can do, at least 2 different main things I do with the state progress checklist. All right, so one thing I do is, like, sometimes people get bogged down. They're like, oh, this project, and I'm not really sure what to do, and like this is what's been going on, and like, how do I give me some framework to think about this? Say, great, all right, so let's use the state progress checklist, because the state progress checklist, it's like doing inventory. All right, so if you own a store and you have bottles of soda and you have bags of chips and you have chocolate bars, you have to keep track of all the different inventory in your supply and what's on the shelves and what's being ordered and what's sold. So you have to keep track of those things. And the state progress checklist, and also the next 2 checklists that we're going to talk about, state synergies and state resources. So these 3 checklists I have in the middle, and it's mainly for taking inventory. So let's take some inventory. For example, if we're doing state synergies, let's take some inventory of the people, all right? And if we are doing state resources, let's take some inventory on our resources. And then for state progress, let's do some inventory on like the whole project. What's going on, generally speaking, for the entire project in all these 9 different areas. So what's going on with shaping potential? What's going on with forming agendas? What's going on with creating effects? All right, so that's actually the first 3 questions at any time. You call somebody, it's like, hey guys, what's going on with the plan? Do we have a plan? What's going on with the plan? What's going on with planning? Tell me the plan. Or what's going on with implementation of the scenario within the plan? All right, so what's going on with this, with item 1? What's going on with item 2? I want to know what's going on with the implementation of that plan. Or it's like, hey guys, so what is the potential that we're shaping here? What is the potential in the market? What is the potential of our staff? What is the potential of our product? What is the potential of new product developments? How are we working with research and development? So what is the potential going on here? All right, so state progress, basically, I know for the most part, I use it when like somebody's like, hey, I need to do something, but they're not exactly sure how to do it. Or in another situation, it's if you're managing a team and you want your team to have a very organized way to make sure that they're thinking through the planning process. All right, so for example, I worked with one student and he's managing these 2 people, and the 2 people, they needed to come up with, they needed to create the program. They needed to create a presentation for the client, and they needed to explain what they were going to do with this consulting practice. They're going to do some kind of consulting service within the company, and they had to explain the consulting service that they were going to present. And the guy that takes lessons from me, he wasn't entirely satisfied with the presentation that these guys gave him. He could tell right away that they weren't very experienced. So what we did is we started from the top. All right. So what are the reuses of this project? All right. So when you complete the project, what is the project going to be used for? So that's number 1. So reuses, as I've taught these checklists over and over again, I found that in the book there seems to be 2 different ideas of reuses. The first concept of reuses, it means like once I do this project, once I do this endeavor. So usually we're talking about like one project, all right? So this consulting company, once they do the presentation, like why are they giving the presentation? Or you could say, once they finish doing the consulting service, what's the purpose of this consulting service? How will it affect the people who are receiving this service? And then, so what are those people going to be able to do because of that service? So the reuse is the result of the change of these people. How did they understand the consulting service, and now how can they implement the changes that need to happen? And then then you go down the list, all right? So then outcomes. So what are the outcomes? All right. So we're doing this consulting service because we want to achieve this result. All right. So we need to present this idea. We need to have this seminar. We need to interview these people. We need to present these findings. All right. So the whole idea of the first stage of this consulting service is to find out and then give recommendations. Once the company receives the recommendations, they can reuse. All right, so they can use those recommendations to help their staff to, do whatever the consulting service is consulting on. Now, another project was like another guy. I mean, I've used this so many times. That's the thing. It's like everybody kind of uses this because no matter what you're trying to do, you're working on a project. So, like once you complete that project, what's next? Who's going to use that product? Who's going to use that service? And then as they use your product or service, then how are they going to, what are they going to do with it? How will it improve their lives? And if you're planning, so if you're planning on creating a new product or improving your product, you need to make sure that the outcomes that people get from using your product are better than the outcomes of the products of your competitors. All right. So if you have a product or a service, your product or service is going to be deployed. People start to use this product or service, and the outcomes which they achieve through your product or service needs to be better than other people, which means what? It means that your service has to be better. It means that your product has to be better. All right, so the next stage down, we got reuses, outcomes, actions. All right, so what are the actions you actually have to do to achieve those outcomes? So that's in the create effects area. And this is like remember at the very very beginning of our 101 day challenge, I was talking about Stephen Covey, and he said begin with the end in mind. And he was saying like, all right, so we have a dependent person, we have a child, we have someone that can't work on their own. And we need to give them the opportunity to think about the outcomes. And when they are clear about those outcomes, when they understand those outcomes and they are clear, and they are what? So actions, if they are proactive, then that's 2 out of the 3. So that, then also there's first things first, all right? So first things first, after you have a plan, you start to do those actions one step at a time, and eventually you're going to achieve those outcomes. So creating effects is how you move from being a dependent upon everybody else person to becoming an independent person. I understand. I take ownership. I know what has to be done, and I take steps to achieve it. All right, so then we continue to move down. Now, the thing is, once you understand the goal, once you know what you want, well, it makes it a lot easier to make a plan. All right, so then in the form agendas, there's 3 more checklists, 3 more themes about forming agendas. So in that section, you need to choose the plan. Now, how are you going to choose the plan? There has to be some options, right? So you need to start to develop or build scenarios. And then how are you going to build those scenarios? Oh yeah, you need to start to make some assumptions. You have to create those assumptions. I have assumptions about the market. I have assumptions about the product. I have assumptions about the customers. I have assumptions. There's things that I think based on what? Based on the research that I've done, based on the experiences that I have. All right, so this is the step where we're building a database, where we are doing keyword research, where we are gathering the data, where we are finding sources. All right, so this is the state assumptions checklist, which we just talked about. In fact, like today we're talking about state resources. Tomorrow we're going to talk about what? So once you have a plan, like you generally have a plan for how you're going to achieve those outcomes, then the bottom part, the shaping potential, should be much more clear, right? Because interactions. So, and like tomorrow we'll talk more about state synergies. So, but interaction is like, so, okay, so how do we interact? What's the composition of the team? Who's the boss? Who's the manager? Who's the subordinate? What types of work do these people do? Who is the customer? Who is the provider? How does all this matrix of people work together in order to implement that plan? Motivations. So remember, motivations, it's connected with when you start motivating people, when you start managing people, then you need to look at that state purposes checklist and understand the purposes that motivate people. All right, so excite those motivations. So you need to go to the state purposes checklist and find out which motivations people have, and then figure out how to incentivize them or help them to line up to do work which is connected with their intrinsic desires. And finally, you got resources. So also tomorrow, the next day, we're going to talk about resources again. But this is like, now that I know exactly what's involved with the plan, I also need to understand what's going on with the resources. So let's make a list. How much? What? When? All right, so once you got the plan downward figured out, then you implement it. All right, so that means, okay, guys, let's go get those resources. All right, guys, let's get that motivation. Go, guys. All right, so let's do the interacting. All right, so let's do the research. Let's look at the different scenarios, and then let's choose the plan. Once we've chosen the plan, let's obviously we have to go back down to resources. Now we have to implement those resources. Now we have to actually motivate those staff, and we need to guide those interactions so that they're doing work according to the plan which we've made, which is called what? It's called actions. What are they doing? They're doing actions in order to achieve the outcomes. And eventually they achieve the result. Now, once they've achieved the result, then we say, okay, guys, we already have a list of the reuses. How do we use the thing that we've created again and again and again? How do we reuse the skills? How do we reuse the money to invest in new projects? How do we reuse the results? What's going to go on further in the future with this checklist, with this project? All right, so thank you for tuning in to day number 96. Quickly hurtling toward the end of this fantastic 101-day challenge. I'm Blaine Gates, and I'll catch you tomorrow.